Let's back up though. For all of what you stated this proposed charter does, one of the things that really jumps out is that it actually increases the size of government, which equates to, or would have to most people, equate to more costs to run government at a time when our economy has been really suffering, still is, and one in which we need to try to get people working again, not finding ways to increase the cost of government. You want to speak to what that will do in terms of increasing cost of government and making it bigger?
Sure. Adding the 2 new board members will increase the budget of Marion County. There's just no question about it. The only way that you could get around that is by stating that the current board positions, one of 2 things. Either the current board is going to be essentially taking the salary, the current salary of the board, and they're going to be splitting it 5 ways, which means that every board member would make, the current board members would make substantially less in salary. They would still keep the same benefit package than what they're currently making, or they would be part-time. And this is something that the proponents do not clearly articulate. They don't clearly articulate, their proponents are essentially saying this is cost neutral. But if you look at it just from a reasonable standpoint, there's no way that this can be cost neutral by adding the 2 new board members. And I can get into that here in a second. So either they're splitting the salaries or they're going part-time. And nowhere in the charter does it state that. Nowhere in the charter does it state how they're going to be essentially making this cost neutral. If you think of it logically, when you add 2 new board members to the county, you're talking about salaries and benefit packages that are in excess of $100,000. So at a minimum, you're looking at over $200,000. Now what's interesting is that there currently are 3 special policy advisors there on the board that currently serve the entire board. Now, potentially, if you add those positions, those are additional costs too. The proponent's position is that there's no reason for additional policy advisors. So for the sake of argument, let's say that you're not going to add special policy advisors. But if you just think about the benefit packages, their salaries, they have to create new offices in the courthouse and the courthouse square building. They have to essentially get new equipment for them, for the board members. They're essentially will have to pay for professional fees and professional associations and other reimbursements for these commissioners as they go to various conferences, as they're involved in various activities within the community. I mean, this is not something that's cost neutral. This is anything but cost neutral. And when you consider that, and the proponents really have not come up with a good solution or a good answer, frankly, to that question and that argument. And from my standpoint, the only way that you're going to address the fact that it's going to cost more money is you're either going to have to cut positions at Marion County, or you're going to have to raise taxes. There's only 2 ways to be able to handle that additional cost increase. Since Marion County is required by statute to have a balanced budget, you're only looking at either cutting positions within the county, and presently the largest group proportionately that receives funds out of the general fund is essentially public safety and security. We're talking about the Sheriff's Department. So that would be, in my mind, that is one of the most significant factors that is not being played out or portrayed out in this proposed ballot measure, is the potential impacts that could occur if this is passed.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have bigger government, and nobody can defend the fact that it won't cost more money. So that's one. You had mentioned before the transparency issue, and do you want to underscore that issue once more in terms of how the dynamic changes for people that are relying on the county to make decisions?
I would. You know, and it's interesting that we're talking about this today because this week happens to be the National Sunshine Week. And the whole notion of our sunshine laws are set up so that we have transparency in our governments, both local, statewide, and also national. And currently, Marion County is very transparent. As I indicated earlier, they're required to have multiple public meetings because they have the 3 board members. They're set up that way, they're orchestrated that way, they operate that way very efficiently. If you added the 5, what you could have happen is you can have a situation where, for example, and it could be something small, it could be something major. You could have one board member number 1, go to board member number 2 and talk to board member number 2 in private about a policy issue that they want to see changed with respect to a new ordinance. Board member number 3, and that wouldn't require a public meeting under the proposed charter. Board member number 3 could go and talk to board member number 4 about the same item. Okay, and that too would not require a public meeting. Or right there, you have a majority vote. You have your 4 votes that you would essentially need. You wouldn't even need the 4. You could go with 3, but both that scenario could work out where you would have no public meeting. They would be able to come up with and adopt and agree and pass essentially a fairly major policy change or ordinance resolution in a way that could affect us as residents without any public input whatsoever. And so that's what we talk about when we talk about essentially getting around the transparency laws. And I just think that it's something that's not necessarily the best for us in Marion County.
Okay, so bigger government, more cost, questionable transparency issues. And you touched on the fact that that with those additional costs to run Marion County government, programs like public safety would potentially suffer underneath that. And then you are now a citizen representative for Bigger Government No Way Political Action Committee. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that effort is going to be over the next few weeks until the election?
Bigger Government No Way is a political action committee that was formed by a number of interested businessmen and women and also by community leaders that feel that the proposed charter is the wrong vehicle for Marion County. It's the wrong thing that's being proposed at this time. You know, speaking on, I guess, my own behalf, I would like to say that I don't believe that charters are necessarily wrong in and of themselves, and I believe that if you had an appropriate task force come together and essentially put on the table the important elements that the community feels would be best for Marion County, and that those stakeholders bought into that, then I would believe, then I'm fine with that sort of an approach. That wasn't done here.
Which is actually, just to kind of take a moment, the approach that the Salem Area Chamber advocates too. It's not such a black and white whether that shouldn't be reviewed, but it needs to have a more proper vehicle in which to explore the benefits or the negatives of that.
Yeah, and I think there's some out there that would argue that there needs to be more commissioners, and if there is a need for more commissioners, then let's bring that to the table and let's talk about that as a community. What's interesting about the statutory governance scheme is that under the current statutory governance scheme, if we determined that we needed more board members on the Marion County Board, we could, and through the board, they could determine that they need to expand from 3 to 5 without a charter. So you don't need that, essentially that charter structure in place in order to change from 3 to 5. You could do it statutorily. The board has that authority to do that. So I think there's a number of things there that if we as a community determined, hey, that's a good idea, maybe you shouldn't necessarily have the treasurer taking care of the county finances in this manner as they have for 150 years, we should do it differently, then that's fine. Let's get that out there and let's talk about that. Mm-hmm. I think that's important to have that dialogue to be able to get there.
Right.